to the Film Yap podcast, vodcast. I still haven't figured out what we're calling this. I'm Christopher Lloyd, and I'm pleased to be joined today by my IFJA colleague, Ben Sears.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
And if you could, for those not familiar, could you tell them about where your work can be found?
Yeah, you can mostly find me on my website, themoviestate.com. It has links to all my socials. I do movie and TV reviews. Every once in a while, I'll do comic book reviews. Every once in a while, I'll do interviews with filmmakers and actors. But mostly, yeah, TV and movie reviews and Oscar and Emmy award predictions. So, um, yeah, everything movie and TV related.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me. And for our topic, we got to talking about starting with the arrival of the Marvels, the latest MCU movie, which as we're recording this will come out tomorrow. I think when this posts, it'll actually be the day of. So interesting film in that we got to see it at our screening earlier this week. I think kind of mixed reactions it's getting. Of course, there's always kind of just some haters out there. I think there's some genuine, superhero fatigue that's set in. I think with the Marvels, there's sort of a built-in, I think misogyny of people just like hate on female-centered movies. That's kind of always out there. But it got us speaking about just more generally about sort of like the state of the superhero movie. Like, where are we? I mean, do you think people are getting fatigued? Is it just that, frankly, the superhero movies haven't been as good the last few years? I think a popular take is that sort of when the Avengers saga, whatever were they calling it, wrapped up so for me so fantastically, the things have just the MCU is just kind of spiraled along. It doesn't seem like it's as driven as much by that first, I guess, 10 years really of the MCU, the official MCU, felt very driven and organized. Or there were even complaints that directors really didn't have a free hand to do what they wanted. They kind of follow the model, whatever you want to say. I mean, it felt like there was very much a guiding light to the movies. And since then, it's just sort of they kind of rambled on. We had had another Thor movie. We had another Ant-Man movie. We had another Black Panther movie. Now we've got a Captain Marvel sequel. So I don't know. What's your take, Ben?
Well, I mean, to answer your first question, I think it's kind of undeniable at this point that superhero fatigue is a real thing. Um, I mean, it's hard to say if it's because there's been so much bad stuff lately, um, or if it's if it was all good, if it would we would all still be feeling the same way. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of undeniable at this point. Um, I would say that there have been some very good superhero films, even this year. I mean, Guardians 3, I really liked. Um, and Across the Spider-Verse, I know it's technically not an MCU movie, but it's MCU adjacent. And it's one of the best movies of the year. So I think there's still been some good stuff. Even like Shang-Chi I liked. I know I was not a big fan of Spider-Man No Way Home, but I mean that one is kind of undeniable just in the money that it made. Um but yeah, I mean I went into the Marvels kind of hoping for the best, as all good film critics do, but um I and yes, I was very prepared for um unfortunately the critical and box office reception to kind of be tanked a little bit, specifically because of the misogyny and uh all of the bad things of the internet and culture these days, unfortunately. I mean, even the original Captain Marvel dealt with all that same stuff and still made $1 billion. So, um, but I went into it with an open mind, and there are some parts that I liked in the Marvels, but it's just, I mean, even taking away who's in it and all of the factors there, it's just a mess in terms of story, from a story standpoint, from a character standpoint. There's just a ton of things that are wrong with it that I didn't care for.
Yeah, I think I'm a little higher on it than you. I will say the original Captain Marvel is one of my favorite MCU movies. And I really like that. Brie Larson. It was just, I think, it got this great performance. And the thing that I really liked about that and her appearance also in the Marvel movies and other places she's cropped up is this sort of sense of finding yourself and being centered and defining yourself through your own lens rather than somebody else's lens. That great moment at the end where her nemesis is like wants to challenge her on his terms, and she just blasts him. It's like, I have nothing to prove to you. And I love that. That was like the message that came out of Captain Marvel: is I have nothing to prove to you. So I was a little discombobulated when we come to this, thing, which when we know we're making it a three-way with two other female superheroes, and suddenly Captain Marvel is all like anxious, and that self-confidence seems gone, that centeredness seems gone, and she's very nervous around her old friend's daughter, and she's kind of doesn't quite like to make them know this Camilla Khan is like this fangirl who's like this. And I don't know. I mean, to me, that would be like, I would think that like that character would maybe start from that place and then end up where she was in the first movie. And instead, it kind of seemed like she was almost going backward in her personal growth as a hero and as a person. So I didn't care for that, but I found it, like Andy Carr wrote for the Film Yap. He says it's kind of a mess, but it's simple and it's fun, and that's something that's been kind of missing from the MCU lately. So I'm kind of on that wavelength with it. Certainly, inferior to the first one, I think, but I'm not hating on it. But like you, I mean, I think I can see the people who are out there who were prepared to dislike it, which unfortunately is enough. It's too many film critics fall into that category, or they enter a film prepared to dislike it. Are going to find plenty of reasons to rap on it. But I didn't want to just talk about the Marvels. It's kind of like you say, the latest generation. You touched on a bunch of others. I think there have been some good superhero movies in the last 3 or 4 years. We got the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which, as I like to point out to everyone, is actually a Scarlet Witch movie. And I thought a very well, very interesting, very much developed that character. Taking a hero or heroine and turning her into a villain, but also kind of coming back. I found that very interesting. I've liked the Spider-Man movies, I think more so than you. I unabashedly like The Flash, and I think I'm one of the few critics or folks out there who really did like The Flash. I think that film also had some problems with, external stuff with the star invading into the space. You're right. We've not seen, from a box office standpoint, the movie's making, but that's also kind of built into the pre versus post COVID theatrical landscape, which, as I've said, the truth is, theater grosses are never going to come back to what they were pre-COVID. We're probably kind of permanently stuck at maybe like about 70% of where we were. So, like Guardians, which I think made just shy of 1 billion, or same about, I think Doctor Strange was about that way, under 1 billion. Probably would have made more like 1.2, 1.3 in the pre-days. Captain Marvel's probably not going to make as much, but I don't know. It's interesting because you talked also about, we had the sort of the Sony and other Marvel adjacent movies, as you put it. We're starting to see like this sort of like third wave of like, oh, okay, we recognize that there's fatigue out there, that people have seen too many iterations of Spider-Man, 3 different Spider-Mans in 20 years we've had.
Technically 4 if you count the animated ones.
Yes, that is true as with Morales. That's thank you for pointing that out. Um, there has been, I think, too much of this leaning into the multiverse thing of it's just like, hey, we'll just flip the script and there's other realities. We can just change everything all around. And that's cool, but that also has the danger of diminishing everything that's come before and contributing to that fatigue. Because if you can just kill off characters, bring them back, and then or have new actors taking over those roles, like we're seeing, Wolverine. Wolverine was definitively killed off in a film that was nominated for a screenplay Oscar, which I love seeing a superhero movie get a screenplay Oscar
Hmm.
nomination. But now we're
Same.
bringing it back for Deadpool 3, and we're going to reboot the X-Men. I mean, they've made it very clear not to give anything away, but stick around for the end of the credits, those Easter eggs at the end of the Marvels, and you'll make clear we're bringing back the X-Men. So this is now really the third iteration of the X-Men in the last 23 years, 24 years. And our friends, our counterparts over there on the DC end, we had, I think I like the DC superhero movies more than most people. I liked the original Justice League. Um, uh, but I also recognize that, a lot of people did not. And then of course there was I'm blanking on the Snyder cut. Like
Right.
whatever it was, like the 4 hour version. I can't remember. I did get through it. It was interesting, but I didn't necessarily say like that was way better. It was just a lot more. Um, I had the huge disappointment of Wonder Woman sequel. I thought, if I was ranking all my favorite superhero movies, Wonder Woman would all Captain Marvel would be on like the top five. Wonder Woman would be in the top five, and then Wonder Woman 1984 was just such a bad letdown. But it's been the same way. So, and now we have, as we mentioned, like we're kind of rebooting on the Marvel side. Bringing in some of those Fantastic Four and X-Men that were on the side from the MCU and bringing them into the fold. The DC Extended Universe, DCEU, as they've been calling it, is now definitively over. But they're rebooting that universe they're now calling it the DCU, with James Gunn, Mr. Big Marvel side guy with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, has jumped ship over to DC and is now going to be like the guiding vision for the reimagining of the DCU, as they're calling it. So
The
I
Kevin
guess that,
Feige of DC.
thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Great way to put it. So I'm just wondering, like, what's your reaction to kind of like, are people ready for another wave, or I mean, are like the like kids that didn't grow up with these Marvel movies and stuff over the last 15 years, are they ready to have like their own generation of movies? I mean, what's your take?
Well, I mean, I don't think they're really gonna have a choice, unfortunately. Um, I was looking it up after the Marvels and because I couldn't remember what else was coming up next. And uh it's changed in the last few days because the next Venom movie got delayed. But um as of right now, starting in like May or so of next year, there's going to be a new Marvel movie almost every month. Um, whether it's the Craven the Hunter, or the Madam Web movie with Dakota Johnson, or I think it's the Thunderbolts is the next like MCU proper movie. Um, we're in for it. And then we haven't touched on the Marvel TV shows yet either. I think that's a big reason, I think, why people are getting so exponentially more fatigued. I mean, with the Marvels, you have to watch at least two other TV shows, Miss Marvel and WandaVision, in order to know who some of these people are. I mean, I watched both of those, and I didn't. It's been a while since I watched WandaVision, but I legit couldn't remember Teyana Paris's character being in that show at all. So I mean, it didn't, fortunately, it didn't really ruin the experience of the Marvels for me, but I feel like if I had actually remembered that or known that going into it, it maybe would have improved maybe a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's so much more stuff that's tied into the movies, and it all just feels like homework, and maybe half of it is good. The Secret Invasion show I haven't watched, but I've heard almost exclusively bad things.
Yeah.
Um, the few other shows that I have missed out on have been okay to negative, I feel like, in the cultural perception. So um that's just another factor in it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked WandaVision kind of confused me when I was first watching it just because it was so I mean really they should have almost made that like the fourth spin-off show because they were really playing around with the format of the superhero thing, which in retrospect I kind of appreciated, but watching it's like it's like okay, we're watching like a 1950s show, now we're watching a 1960s show, now we're watching, and it's just like it literally it took me to like the fifth episode before I was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And that, of course, a lot of that then set up the Doctor Strange movie that was really a Scarlet Witch movie.
Hmm.
Uh, and the first season of Loki, which was it almost kind of a standalone thing, but I think now with the second season, we're seeing how some of that stuff is going to tie back into the broader MCU. I really like the Falcon and Captain America show. But
Falcon
that
and the Winter Soldier.
yeah, which really became the Captain America and Soldier show. Not to give too much away. Um, I really liked it a lot, but it also feels like that was almost like that was. I don't know what's going to happen with like the Falcon character slash Captain America character. Like, is that person going to continue in the MCU? If so, then fine. But my feeling with that was it was just sort of like a off to the side. And you're right, with all the different shows and spinoffs and iterations, it's almost like this thing where you have to do homework. Like, okay, like is this on the test? It's like, are we going to see this characters and storylines figuring into the next movies, or is this just a off to the side thing? We should also mention the real life complications of it seemed very, very clear that they were planning to center the next round of MCU movies around the character of Kang the Conqueror,
Yeah.
um, played by the actor Jonathan Majors, an actor who has come on the scene just within the last really like 4 or 5 years, and I've been very, very impressed with his work. If you haven't seen him in like Last Black Man in San Francisco, go catch that. But now he has this very real world thing where he's got some very serious domestic violence charges against him, and obviously it didn't factor in quickly enough to be to head off the stuff that was already in the works, but it's sounding like they may have to either recast or just rejigger everything, and that's obviously not very good from a creative standpoint where you're taking like years of pre-planning, that vision that we talked about with having like the first with the Avengers saga where everything felt laid out, and now everything's just all the pathway's just been sort of thrown into chaos and they have to reconfigure. So I mean, sometimes you get some great creativity coming out of chaos where it's like, oh, we don't know what to do, let's figure something out, and sometimes it just ends up being a mess. And thus far, it seems like it's falling a little more on the messy side.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, but I don't know why they can't just recast him. I mean, they're literally dealing with the multiverse in all of these movies and TV shows where any version of any given character could look differently in a different universe. I don't know why they don't just do that. I mean, that's what I would do. That seems like the simplest solution to me. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they did it with Terrence Howard and Don Cheadle
Right.
for the
Yeah.
Orphan character. So why couldn't they?
Yeah. Um, to go back to the TV, DC doesn't have as much of an output in TV, but I like two shows specifically: the Peacemaker show with John Cena and the animated Harley Quinn show. I really like both of those. Those are excellent. If anyone is interested in checking out DC uh properties on TV, those are definitely worth checking out, and they're very uh adult oriented. They're not not as all ages friendly as the Marvel stuff. So
Yeah.
um yeah, uh I'm not, honestly, I haven't watched as many of the DC movies lately. I haven't seen the Shazam sequel. I haven't watched all of the Flash. I haven't watched Blue Beetle yet. I unfortunately watched Black Adam last year. I think that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen any of the DC TV streaming stuff at all, the Flash, any of that. I've watched most of the Marvel stuff, but not all of it. Um, and yeah, you're right in that very much it seems like at times it has that feeling of homework, or like, like the one thing I hear a lot from particularly kind of like, fanboys and fangirls and stuff is like, oh, that's canon. Like you have to have had all this background research in order to watch the movie. And that's never a good feeling when it feels like you can't just jump in and watch a movie. But my take is despite all that, I mean, I grew up with comic books. I still got like literally an entire year's worth of them down in my basement, and in sheaths, waiting for the day when they are valuable again and I can sell them off. Uh, so I personally do not experience a lot of superhero fatigue myself. I mean, to me, it's all about the individual movies. Some have been really good, some have been not so good. Black Adam was not so good. Um, I was not a huge fan of the Black Panther sequel. I mean, it's very rare that it's come along and there's been a superhero movie and I was just like that. I didn't like that at all. Honestly, the only ones that really pop to mind for me are ones that I know some of our friends and colleagues really like, which is like the Venom movies. I've not cared
Mm.
for either of those. But the thing is, with the superhero movies, is there's just so much lore there. I mean, you've got decades and decades of storylines and things for them to fall back on and take from. That there's always this, and of course, over the course of 50, 60 years, some of these heroes have been around. They've died, they've been reborn, they've had somebody else become the hero, almost like a soap opera.
Hmm.
So there's always that potential. So, and frankly, to me, I've liked seeing them like try to explore some of these lesser known characters. I was really jazzed about them making a Craven the Hunter movie. He was this figure who was a villain in the comic books for a long time, and really kind of a ridiculous one. And then there was a big thing, a Spider-Man thing, gosh, must be like 20, 25 years ago. I think it was called like The Death of Craven, where they sort of really reclaimed the character into sort of this dark, brooding anti-hero. And I think that's what they're looking to do with this movie, which was supposed to have been released this year and is pushed off to 2024. So like I'm excited about that. They're rebooting the Fantastic Four. I'm excited about that because I'm hoping they'll finally get a chance to do the Fantastic Four right. This would be the fourth iteration. There was a Roger Corman movie back in the day that was horrible. Then there was the other ones, and they did the reboot with the youngsters about 8 years ago. Which, boy, I had such high hopes for that film given the cast, and it just fell down a hole, that thing. So now they're redoing this. So my all-time favorite superhero by far, bar none, is the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, Benjamin Grimm. I love him from the Fantastic Four. I love when he got his own spin-off comic book series, of which I have all 36 editions. Thank you very much. Um, and so I'm hopeful they'll do my thing, do them right, and I'm hoping that they will finally make him look right, because no one's ever gotten the look of the thing right. They tried to do it with costumes, they tried to do it with CGI. They get the color, they get the texture like this, and I keep preaching. If any Hollywood types out there can possibly hear this, I have two words for you on how to do the thing right. And that is, those two words are brow ridge. Just, if you look at the thing in the comic book, he has this very distinct squarish rectangular ridge, like eyebrow ridge over his
Hmm.
head, which gives him this sort of like, it makes almost his head look like he's wearing a helmet. It gives him almost like a martial look to him. And for whatever reason, every iteration they've done of the thing for movies, they remove the brow ridge, and I don't know why they do it. I mean, to me, it's like taking away Superman's spit curl. You just can't do that. So I'm continually hopeful. I mean, even when I see a bad superhero movie, gosh, when I hear another one's coming 6 months or 8 months down the line, I still get a little jazzed for it.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Yeah, I'm definitely excited. The Aquaman sequel is coming out in a little over a month. I'm excited for that. I don't know why it's been delayed so much. The first movie made, I think, at least $1 billion, and was really good, in a silly, goofy kind of way. So I'm excited for that. I hope it's better than Warner Brothers apparently thinks it is. Um, to talk about the visual effects, though, I mean, I'm not the first person to say that that's kind of been Marvel's Achilles heel, pretty much since they started. And I'm curious, the big thing that's happened since the Marvels finished production, and the thing that happened between then and now is that the VFX workers unionized.
Yeah,
So I'm curious how much that will affect the quality in the movies going forward. I mean, that's just another factor that I think people have kind of turned against Marvel, is the stories that have come out about the VFX workers and just the quality that's been as a result of it. Um, that's a big thing that I'm going to be looking out for.
yeah,
You had mentioned the feeling of continuity and canon with all of these Marvel movies, and that's one of the things that I have enjoyed about the DC movies, is that you can kind of just jump around from one movie to the next without having to worry about, whether you missed something, or you know the Margot Robbie Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie can take place in one universe, and the Aquaman movie can take place in an entirely different universe. You don't have to worry about them necessarily, you know, just the implications from one movie to another. I don't know, maybe they did try and shoehorn them into one another at one point. I would have to go back and watch them a little more closely, but that's kind of the vibe that I got from those. And I think that's what, when they were trying to do the Zack Snyder movies, when they were all, tightly controlled and trying to connect one another and do the Marvel thing, that's when they were not as good. And then once they kind of went away from that, then I think that it really improved with, Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Harley Quinn and Shazam to some extent.
yeah. Maybe the lack of a big overriding vision, the lack of a cohesive whole, is in some ways be a benefit, because people understand that there doesn't have to be, you know, one superhero movie does not have to interlock with another quite so well as like the Avengers saga did, and people are okay with that. I mean, I think it really, they rise or fall on each movie and each hero. If a hero's done really well, I mean, like I love the first iteration of Spider-Man, but the second one with Andrew Garfield I thought was also really good. And then I've really loved the latest one, and of course, not too late for spoilers, but bringing all three of those actors back for the last one. Was it fan servicing? Probably, but it was done very well. Touching on the VXF thing that you talked about, yeah, I mean, that was something that was off-putting because we've been so used to that polish from the MCU movies and to I think another extent also the DCEU movies and such. So when people started seeing stuff more so on like on the Disney Plus streaming shows, but to some of the like the Eternals, I mean, people talking about some of the VFX and that. Yeah, where it's just like what we've heard is that the visual effects people are just putting these incredibly tight deadlines, but they just have too much work to do in too much time because they're trying to hit a particular release date, and that's made things suffer. I read something just the other day about like She-Hulk, which is actually one of my favorite of the streaming spin-offs, was actually released on the Disney Plus platform with still temporary effects in there. And they, literally the episodes were out and then they went back and fixed them up as time went on. And you can, at the time you could like sit there and like pause and still step and see like, yeah, that doesn't look very good. But I don't know. Just to kind of wrap things up, I understand people who have concerns, and I understand people who have fatigue about superhero movies. I mean, it would just be like, if you're like watching TV in the 1970s and 80s, and there were like so many private detective shows on TV, then you just be like, well, how many private detectives are there out there? I'm sure some people feel that way about the superhero movies, but I mean, to me, it just comes down to, are they good movies? Are they compelling characters? Do you want to spend time with them? Are you amazed by what you see on the screen? Do you take it with you in the days and weeks and months and years after, and carry those movies along with you? And sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But I mean, I will, the superhero movies that I have really cherished, I cherish along with all sorts of other movies that I love, from dramas to musicals to comedies to you name it. So as long as the movies are good, I'm there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I even when the MCU movies were like at their height, um, I didn't really come back to them. So, um, I think probably Black Panther and the two Infinity War movies, Infinity War and Endgame. I've watched those several times. I think I've watched Ragnarok a couple times. But other than that, yeah, I don't really come back to them all that often. So, um, if you are bummed about the Marvels or Quantumania or whatever, that's fine. If you love them, that's fine. I'm not going to lose any sleep over any of them. I, you know, eh, should these movies be coming out, 4 times a year and cost 250 million dollars each? Maybe not, but I mean, what else? I mean, unfortunately, people aren't coming to the movies as much without those. So, although there have been a couple outliers this year and last year, but um,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. It's a tricky thing to figure out, and unfortunately, I don't have all the answers. Believe it
yeah.
or not.
Well, we're critics, so we don't have the answers. We just have the opinions, and that's all we can do is give them to you honestly and openly, and hope that we are good stewards, guides in your personal film journey. So, Ben, I appreciate you sharing this time with me. If you could once again just tell people where they can find your work.
Yeah, thanks again. This has been fun. Yeah, find me on themoviestate.com. That That's got about 95% of my stuff. Every once in a while, I'll write for Midwest Film Journal, which has some of our friends and colleagues from the IFJ on there. But yeah, mostly themoviestate.com.
All right. And of course, you can find our stuff here on filmyap.substack.com. Follow us on @thefilmyap on both Twitter and Facebook. And we will see you next time at the movies. Thanks.